All right, let's run through the hands here before calling it a night. In this first notable hand, I raise it to $20 from under the gun with ace deuce suited. A little bit loose in a full ring game, but we are playing 8-handed, and I think I can open up here a little bit light given that the table is playing fairly passive. I get calls from the hijack and the button, and we go three ways to a flop of queen 8-3 rainbow. So I flop and over here with some backdoors. I decide to c-bet it for $30, and only the hijack makes the call. Turn brings a 5 of clubs, which puts a backdoor flush draw on the board, and I do pick up a wheel draw. All in all, it's still a pretty dry board that's in my favor here for my range, so I decide to keep at it with the aggression, and I fire out $90, and after deliberating for a little bit, he lets it go. In this next hand, it's a straddle pot. I raise it from the cutoff to $35 with ace-king offsuit. The button puts in a raise to $100, leaving $500 back. With his stack size, I'm never going to be folding in this spot. It's either continuing through a call or a raise. I opt to put in a raise to $250, which would leave him $350 back if he were to call. My rationale at the time was to make it look like it was a bit of a bluff on my end, and hopefully he had a hand like ace-jack suited or ace-queen suited where he would just overvalue those types of holdings and jam it and be dominated. But looking back, I'm not exactly sure that's the best play. I would have probably liked to just jam it all in to make sure I get to see all 5 cards and realize the equity that I have with ace-king here. But that's the sizing that I opted for at the time, and he actually does continue by just calling. We go heads up to a flop of 10-10-3 with 2 clubs, so there's a flush draw out there. Neither of us should have a 10 there too often. I decide to c-bet it for pretty small here, $60. He thinks about it for a little bit and makes the call. Turn comes a 6 of diamonds, and I decide to slow down and check it over to him. He pretty quickly jams all in for $300. And while he could have hands that I beat, such as ace-jack of clubs or ace-queen of clubs, I feel that he's weighted towards value here, something like pocket queens. And I ultimately decide to let it go. I did put myself in a pretty strange spot here, taking some rather poor line work, I think. I wasn't fully clear in terms of everything I wanted to do in this hand, and that certainly shows. Not a spot you want to be in when you have aggressive action in a hand. You don't want to just go through the mechanics of betting, which is what I did here. You want to have a better plan when you navigate these spots, and I didn't. That showed, and I lose this hand. In this next hand, I find myself playing passive with a fairly marginal holding. There's a middle position raise to $20. I call from the low jack with 6-8 of hearts, and we get 4 additional callers as well from the hijack, cutoff, small blind, and big blind. We go heavily multi-way to a flop of queen 6-5 rainbow. So I flop middle pair here with some backdoors. Action checks through. Turn comes a pretty good card from my hand. It comes in 8 of diamonds, so I make 2 pair, but it does put out a straight as well as a backdoor flush draw. Small blind leads for $30. The initial raiser, the middle position player, he calls, and I decide to bump it up to $150. Player to my direct left, the hijack, makes the call. Cutoff folds, and the small blind now jams for $375 total. Gets over to middle position. He calls, leaving $100 back. I think it through for a little bit. Because the middle position tanked, it feels like I'm ahead of him. For the small blind player, it's a little bit of a different story. He is a novice player from what I've been able to observe thus far. Played with him, I think, another session previously, and he seems like someone who's still trying to figure out the game. I think that can go one of 2 ways. One, he can have a really strong hand, or 2, he can have a hand that he perceives to be very strong that he could be overplaying, such as a hand like ace-queen. So with that being considered, I decide to jam as well, just to try to get the additional money in from the middle position and push out the hijack. That is indeed what happens. The hijack folds and middle position calls off his remaining $100. We go to a river, which comes a king of diamonds, so it completes the backdoor flush. Not a good card. Side pot goes first, so middle position tables his hand. He has 9-10 off suit for the missed double gutter, so I take down the side pot, and the small blind shows 7-9 of hearts for the straight and takes down the main pot. So pretty rough hand here for me, playing again a marginal holding in a multi-way spot here. I think when you have a hand like 6-8 of hearts, it's better to try to narrow the field and not put yourself in hands that you can have some reverse implied odds. And that's pretty much what happened for me here. I lose the hand, and I did get more info on the small blind in terms of the fact that he actually had the goods here, not overplaying his hand. So do lose a pretty big pot here. Shortly after those two losing hands, I decided to take a break. Just needed a walk to clear the head. I wasn't playing well at all and just needed to recalibrate, and I was able to do so. And that's when this next hand develops. I raise it from under the gun to $20 with walking sticks, and I get calls from the cutoff and button. Three ways to a flop of 8-6-3 rainbow. Good flop for my hand. I c-bet it for $40 and both players call. We go three ways to a turn, which comes great for my hand. It comes a 7 of clubs, so I make a set, but it puts out some straights as well as a backdoor flush draw. I size up for value. I bet $120 and only the cutoff calls. We go to a river of a 4 of clubs, so it completes backdoor clubs and a one-liner with the 5. And now I think I just have a very strong bluff catcher. So I decide to check. He bets $225 and puts me in a pretty tough spot here. I try to break down the hand. I suspect that if he had 9-10, I would have heard from him on the turn, so I rule that hand out. He could have some hands like 6x of clubs or 8x of clubs that got there. He can also have a 5 to make the straight, but it'd be pretty hard to have a 5 unless he had exactly pocket 5s or 5-6 suited. After thinking about it for a little bit, this is ultimately one of the better hands I'm going to arrive with in this spot to be bluff catching here. It's obviously better than an overpair. So with that in mind, my hand's too strong to fold, so I make the call, and he tables his hand, which happens to be 6-10 offsuit for middle pair and a missed straight draw. So take it down here. In this next hand, there's a middle position raise to $20. I 3-bet it from the button to $65 with pocket 10s. The big blind cold calls and the middle position raiser calls as well. We go three ways to a flop of King 10-4 rainbow. Great flop with middle set. Checks to me. I c-bet $100 and the big blind calls with $425 back and the middle position folds. Heads up to a turn, which is another dry card. It comes a 6 of hearts. Checks to me. And this time I decide to size up. He snap jams for $425. I, of course, make the quick call. River comes, a 7 of hearts. He asks if I have a set, to which I confirm that I do. I table my hand and I take it down. I did see him flash an ace of spades, I believe, so he probably had ace king. And just a really bad flop for him if that's the case. And I take this hand down. In this next hand, I raise it to $20 from the cutoff with pocket jacks, and I get calls from the button, small blind, and big blind. Four ways to a flop of 9-4-3 with 2 diamonds. Checks over to me. I decide to c-bet it for $50, and I get calls from the button and the small blind. Turn comes at 8 of clubs, so pretty good break card overall. It should only help a hand like 8-9, and if they have it, so be it. Action checks to me. I decide to hike it up a bit to $175. Button folds and the small blind player calls. The river comes a 5 of hearts, which isn't too bad of a card overall. Obviously it completes ace deuce and 6-7, which could be in small blind's range, but when he checks it to me, I feel pretty comfortable to try to go for some value. I think he's split between missed flush draws and a stubborn 9. So in an effort to target that 9, I bet $225, but he quickly lets it go. So pretty sure he had a flush draw in this spot. Not too long after that positive string of hands, I did hit a bump on the road. I ended up losing with ace king of clubs against pocket queens in an all-in pot pre-flop for $650. After that hand, I just continued to amp up the aggression. My table was playing fairly passive, and I just wanted to contest for pots and put myself in winning positions with more clarity. And I have a couple more hands to demonstrate that particular strategy. I decide to raise it light from middle position with King 10 offsuit to $20, and I get 3 callers. 4 ways to a flop of 10-9-3 with 2 clubs, so I flop top pair on a fairly draw heavy board. Action checks to me. I decide to c-bet it for $50 and only the cutoff calls. The turn is a 3 of hearts, which is a good card because it doesn't complete any straights or flushes. I bet $125 and he lets it go. All right, last interesting hand to note. There's an under the gun raised to $30, under the gun 1 and small blind call. I decide to play loose and call from the big blind with 6-7 offsuit. We go 4 ways to a flop of ace-5 deuce with 2 diamonds. Action checks through. The turn comes at 8 of spades, which is a good card for me because I pick up an up and down straight draw. Small blind checks, and because nobody bet on the flop, I try to just take it down here by betting $50. Under the gun folds, and under the gun 1 calls, small blind folds. River comes an ace of spades, so I brick out, and this player has around $280 left in his stack. Because there was no betting on the flop, I just don't think he ever has an ace here, so I decide to apply max pressure and put in $300 to put him all in. He doesn't think too long and lets it go. Alright, so that wraps it up for the notable hands played. Apologies for the poor lighting just in my car here. It's pretty late, a little bit past 3 a.m. And I was ultimately in the game for $1,500, had to add on a couple times. At the worst point, I was stuck in the neighborhood of $800. Ended up battling back and I cashed out $2,098. So a net win of $598 to wrap up this session. Lots of things to take away from this session. Didn't play great. Lots of things to work on. I really think that because of the pandemic, my game has regressed a little bit. I was thinking a lot more clearly because I was playing more often pre-pandemic, and just got to get back to studying a bit, get back to putting in the volume, and hopefully all of the mechanics come back and make more sense. Hopefully the feel for the game and the players comes back. Right now I'm still just figuring it out, and so you'll see me make a bunch of mistakes probably in the next handful of videos, but I hope to get back to a good point in my game. Don't want to ramble too long, so that's just going to wrap it up for this one. Thanks for following along, and I'll catch you all on the next one.